It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, today we're going to jump on that Sharp Interactive board, go through Kyocera's first quarter for FY24. Kyocera hits the numbers. They always do. They do a great job with operating profit. I had to dig through this presentation to find something to scold them about. I did find a couple of things. We'll get to that in today's episode. But, yesterday I get an email from somebody. Every once in a while I get these types of emails. And the gentleman was saying, well, Ray, can't you talk about something good? I mean, a lot of your episodes are really depressing. Can you talk about something good? And I said, well, if you're talking about today's episode, because this is yesterday when I did the Konica Minolta first quarter, I can understand, because Konica Minolta is a financial train wreck. And if you talk about that realistically, there's no good news about it. And so I tried to explain to this gentleman that, at the end of the day, I do what I do because nobody else will do it, number one. And I do what I do because even though it might be bad news, with bad news, there's always good news. Ladies and gentlemen, bad news can also create good news, and most of the time it does. Here's a great example. It was about 4 years ago when I first mentioned that maybe Kyocera should take the place of Konica Minolta as one of the major players in our space, in the minds of the industry. Because they haven't been a major player in our space for a long time because they can't produce any profit. Their financial performance is horrific. So they're not really one of the major 5 players in our space. They're just one of the players in our space who can't produce financially. That's the reality. But when you look at Kyocera, they kill it. They always hit their forecasts. They always come in with operating profit. Are they a smaller in revenue company? Well, sure. But you know what? It really doesn't matter what your revenue is. It matters that you can maintain as a going concern and you produce profit for the employees that work at your company and for the customers that you serve and support. That's more important than chasing revenue at all costs and going bankrupt along the way. And so today I'm going to share some good news, but with it is going to come some bad news. I am officially declaring that Kyocera has taken the place of Konica Minolta as one of the major 5 players in our industry. They've taken the place, at least in my mind, and I think if the industry really researches Kyocera and really digs into what they're doing, they'll take the place in the minds of everybody else too. Konica Minolta no longer deserves that space in our minds or on any chart we might produce. Like I said, their revenue might be more, but they cannot produce profit. They're a miserably run company, and that's just the reality. So there's an example. Really good news about Kyocera taking the place of Konica Minolta, right? Really bad news regarding Konica Minolta. They're kind of tied together. So ladies and gentlemen, let's jump on the Sharp Interactive board and talk about Kyocera. Top line number, $3.3 billion for the entire company for the first quarter. Operating profit, $180.6 million, 5.4% first quarter in. Good job. Let's look at that document solution group, because that's what we all care about, right? Top line revenue, $730.1 million with an operating profit of $63.5 million, 8.7%. Now I want to yell at Kyocera. Why the hell couldn't that be 9%? I mean, you had to commit at 8.7%. You couldn't go out there and raise the price on just 1 or 2 things and get that number up. It's pretty good to get yelled at for something like that, isn't it? Congratulations, Kyocera. Document Solution Unit worldwide, 8.7% operating profit. Your first quarter is great. And the thing about Kyocera, they don't just have one quarter that's really good and then they fall to hell and at the end of the year they lose a bunch of money. They're pretty consistent with their operating profit. I wanted to do a little bit of comparison here because I really want to convince everybody that Konica Minolta has no right being in the minds of the industry as one of the top 5 players because they're completely a miserable train wreck. And I want you to think about, let's just start out with the revenue that Konica Minolta produced in their print business and the profitability with that revenue. Taking the digital workplace unit and the professional print unit together, they did a total of $1.4 billion. They had an operating profit of 1.5% or $20.4 million. $20.4 million. Our friends at Kyocera did half of the revenue, $731 million. And they did $63 million in operating profit. They did triple the operating profit on half of the revenue. That's a disciplined company compared to Konica Minolta. And this isn't just a fluke with Konica Minolta. I know a lot of people are excited because they finally made some profit in their print business, but at the end of the day, it's 1.5%. And we'll see what they do the rest of the year. And I also brought up that corporate Kyocera that lost a whole crap load of millions of dollars. So when you think about Kyocera and you look at their financials, there's just so much cleaner. They're so much cleaner. I don't feel like I have to look through the shells and where's the money at? Oh, where's what? They just seem to be so much better run. Let me just say it that way. Look at the forecast, ladies and gentlemen. If you look over here on this chart right here, and you got Kyocera out there, and they're going to forecast for their business unit in the Document Solutions Group. So we're going to come down here. They're forecasted to do $282.1 million in operating profit. That would be 8.8%. Kyocera, make it 9%. Holy smokes. But that's still pretty good, right? Ladies and gentlemen, the entire Konica Minolta is predicting to do like $8 billion for the year. Their entire company, all the different divisions. And they want to do an operating profit of 1.5%, which is around 200-something million. Kyocera wants to do $281 million on $3.2 billion in total revenue for their print business for this year. That's the difference. And they're going to do it because they have discipline. And I think Konica needs to learn from this, along with the rest of the industry. You know, just because you've read about Konica for the last 5 or 6 or 10 years in all the industry's publications, and you've allowed them to use a bunch of adjectives without any kind of math behind it, and you got all excited, and you watch the pictures of the race car. This is so absurd to me. Let's just flash to the whole world all this crazy stuff we're doing, and we can't make any money. Totally absurd. Now let's talk about Kyocera and their inkjet technology. So we all know that Kyocera took that Task Alpha 15000C and they made it a black and white machine. They're not going to sell it here in the United States. They're selling that thing in Japan. But they didn't do that to sell the Task Alpha 15000C as a black and white machine. Okay? They did that as phase 1 of bringing black and white ink to the whole world, to their whole line. That's what I believe. I don't know any secrets. That's just my belief. And I'm hoping I'm right. I'm hoping the investment they made by taking that Task Alpha 15000C and converting that thing into a black and white machine is their way of testing their technologies. Because that makes sense to me. And when I think about Kyocera, they don't do a whole lot of things that don't make sense. And when they do things that are wrong, they get out of that space pretty quick. And that's why they're able to maintain their strong operating profit. So I'm interested to see what they do with that. But ladies and gentlemen, here's a big question for Kyocera. Are you ready to take Lexmark's place in the market globally? We all know what's going on with 9-Star. We all know that 9-Star owns Lexmark. We know that we got Lexmark, the Phantom, that crazy G&G printer, a banned entity from the United States for using slave labor. And I'm thinking to myself that Kyocera with their A4 lineup is in a perfect position to just be the replacement for Lexmark. And folks, here's some more good news, bad news. The good news is that Kyocera is an OEM that's in perfect position to replace Lexmark globally as the world gets disgusted with its owner's 9-Star. That's a fact. That's good news for Kyocera. It's horrific news for Lexmark. This whole slave labor thing is terrible news for Lexmark. When we think about all the people that work at Lexmark in the free world. For that matter, when we think about the people that work at 9-Star in the free world. That have nothing to do with using slaves to manufacture things. It's just terrible, terrible news to think of these people one day losing their job over this. Losing their customers over this. But it's a reality, ladies and gentlemen. This story ain't going away. It's not. So let me wrap up today's episode with this. I want to congratulate Kyocera on having a fantastic quarter. Kyocera, I'm sorry that I had to bring in Konica Minolta and bring in the slave labor thing into your episode as we celebrate your great quarter. But with all good news, there is bad news. They live hand in hand. What our industry needs to be able to do is deal with the damn bad news. Don't run from the critics. Engage with the critics. Because everybody watching me knows this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo, and I'll see you all tomorrow.